Hello, everyone, and thank you for watching Prescott today. I am Prescott City Manager Dallin Kimble and your host. I'm excited to welcome Rick Crider to the show. He's our new airport director. Welcome, Rick.
Thank you.
You've been with the city since May or so?
End of May, I think this is week 12, wrapping up week 12.
Week 12, right on. Well, tell us a little bit about
I
yourself.
have all the answers now, right?
You're right, you got it.
Well, so I guess going back to my love of aviation, I can point to my seventh grade year when a social studies teacher invited me to go flying. He said, "You have $7 and a permission slip. I'm just got my private pilot's license. I'll take you and some of your peers flying." Did that. I'm not sure what went through my parents' head, quite frankly, but they allowed me to go and just really fell in love with aviation. So growing up, I worked in construction and restaurants a little bit, but I've really been most of my career in airport management. This is Airport 7. Started off in Austin, Texas as an intern and went to Burbank, California, then Columbus, Ohio, Abilene, Texas, Gainesville, Florida. Did consulting for a short time, and then the last 12 and a half years I was in San Antonio at another base transition, Kelly Air Force Base, transition to Port San Antonio. So had a great time there, great career there, leading the airport, the railport, and then did a lot of work in the military relations area.
Yeah, that's really neat. So what was it about Prescott that made this an interesting place for you?
Gosh, it's quality of life in a couple words. Just a beautiful place. And full disclosure, I was working with a recruiter. It's just, I think, we know that there's a time, it's time to start kind of looking around. And so looked at some other opportunities, and the recruiter really said, "Hey, take a look at Prescott." And we had never been here. So when I was offered an interview, Joyce and I came out. We came ahead of time and spent a little time on the weekend and looked around and just really fell in love with it. So San Antonio is a great place to live. No slight to them at all, but it's a big place. 2.6 million people. It'll double in size in the next 20 years. So just the warmth and the comfort and the ability to know your neighbors. In a beautiful place. The people themselves were very, very much an attraction. That's all on the personal side. I'm a self-admit I'm an airport nerd. So from a professional side, the chance to lead an organization that's kind of going to the next chapter, right? You've got such a fantastic 330 based airplanes. Very solid general aviation community. The fire base, the air service. Embry-Riddle is a world-class institution that tip of the spear for flight training. So that just combination of rocks in place, I guess, were just really appealing to me. So
yeah, it's always that both, right? The personal side and the professional opportunity.
Right. I think we get pickier as we get older.
Yeah. Well, that's the luxury we have, right? That's fantastic. So tell us, you've got all the answers now. You're an airport nerd.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about the airport we have here in Prescott, and what are your first impressions?
Well, nothing but praise. Again, I think there's some areas for improvement. Watched, of course, some of the discussions over the last year and a half about land acquisition and growth and runway extensions. So certainly some challenges, some great professional challenges, but again, just such a vibrant core base. Of the based aircraft, the activities that happen there. The team is fantastic. It's a team that's eager to learn, grow in their own professional disciplines. So just those combinations, I've been, very welcomed. And I think the ideas that I bring to the table are welcomed. So some work to be done, and kind of modernizing how we do leases, for example, and make move the airport towards self-sufficiency, which is a goal of all airports. But frankly, it's a grant assurance. It's something that the FAA and the state expects. So some of those professional challenges, but again, what a vibrant core mix that's here already to build from.
Absolutely. When we went around the airport a couple weeks ago, I guess,
right.
Everybody we talked to said, we love it here and we want to do more here.
Right.
And that's a good problem to have.
It is. And it feeds on each other. Again, with Embry-Riddle, we talk a lot about Embry-Riddle. They're a great community partner. With a student population of 3,000, about a third of that is at the airport. But the reality, they're the largest of 6 flight schools. So they do essentially the core training, and then you've got another entity that does pilot development, where they prepare them for the airlines. You've got several other flight schools. So overall, you've got this really unique and robust flight training and educational activity that happens at the airport. And so that begets other successes. Qatar Aviation is expanding. Embry-Riddle is expanding. They're expanding their legacy location, and they're building a brand new campus, the SAFE complex. So investing another $15 million in that regard. So very exciting. Writ large, Embry-Riddle is also doing a lot of great things in their core campus, away from the airport. So that that begets other advances and other advancements, right? I think what all communities covet is that workforce, very talented, sharp, young workforce that wants to be here. They also covet that quality of life. So it's to me an opportunity to find the businesses, the innovation entrepreneurs that want to be here in Prescott and take advantage of that, and build on that critical mass and build that aviation ecosystem, if you will.
Right. Right. I think we can come back. We'll talk a little bit more about future and that kind of thing. But you mentioned land acquisition around the airport, and there's been a little bit of talk around Prescott about that over the last little while.
Right.
Talk to us a little bit more about that. You wrote an op-ed here recently. Mm-hmm. Why do we need to have some of these land acquisitions for the airport?
Sure. Well, I mean, there are a number of reasons to do land acquisition, of course. There's compliance, safety standards and navigable airspace. There's compatible land development, so you want development around the airport that understands and is not affected by the noise and the traffic and some of the things that go with an active airport. There's reasons of runway extension. We have not just Embry-Riddle, but a vibrant fire base that needs additional length. The air service also needs an additional runway length, so you've got reasons of expansion of the runway. You've got and just the growth of the footprint itself, so that we can do our job as catalyst of economic development. We have the space for aeronautic development and expansion. But bottom line, we're a pretty constrained airport, 587 acres. If you look at our peers, even in Arizona, we're I'd say closely sized with 4 of them and about a third of the largest peer, Yuma, Arizona. But we do 10 times the number of operations from our closest, Yuma's our closest peer, and almost 26 times the smallest peer. So what that tells you kind of in a nutshell is that we do a whole lot with a very small footprint. So land acquisition has a variety of reasons, but at the end of the day, I think that for us to do our job as stewards of the community and aviation and aerospace within our community, really need to grow that footprint for a variety of reasons. I joked earlier that a lot of communities will take on one of those elements at a time. We're kind of taking on all 4 at one time, which makes it a bit more complex.
Yeah.
But that's okay. It's a topic that's worth taking on and solving.
Right. And so it helps with future operations. It helps with compatible use. Mm-hmm. It helps just make sure we've got safe areas around the airport. These are all important things.
Right.
You mentioned the longer runway. We've talked a little bit about the future of the airport. What are your, I don't know if you want to call them goals or priorities, or just kind of your vision for the next 6 months or the future of the airport?
Gosh, it all happens at once, right? I think, if you kind of break it into pieces, getting, kind of, and this is not a Rick Crider vision, it has to be a community vision, right? It has to resonate and be embraced by our elected officials and our partners with the FAA and the state throughout their different offices. But get everybody kind of focused on a strategy that makes sense for us to achieve that land acquisition, right? There's not one solution. There's several solutions out there. So finding the right mix, I think, is certainly an important goal. The runway extension is important to the fire base. It's important to the growth of our air service. So taking the next steps in that regard. So we're talking now with the FAA on the national level about our forecast and kind of they've poked a few holes in it. So we go back and have that honest conversation with them about where we need to better tell the story and justify the need. That evolves into a benefit cost analysis. So the next pieces. But the good news is that it's not a new topic. It's not a new topic in the community. This has been in the papers and conversation in the lips of the citizens for the last 4 or 5 years. it's not a new topic for the FA. So the good news is that we're starting to see everybody kind of, ask their own technical questions from their perspective, but get their arms around it. What does that look like? What's the exact right length of the runway? What's the exact right strength of the runway to meet those needs?
Yeah.
And then finally, air service. I mean, everybody's very passionate about air service. So we've got right after I got here, we put out an application for a boarding bridge. We'll see where that goes. It's kind of a unique opportunity, so we'll see if we're successful in that regard. But continue to raise the bar. The terminal, I think, opened in 2020. The jet service started in 2019. So this is all pretty new stuff and phenomenally embraced by the community. The ridership is good, even in a constrained environment. So how do we build on that? How do we build on that success? Tell the story with the airlines, the future airlines. Tell the story about the market, the viability of the market, and continue to put those pieces in place that help us move in that direction. So those are all big priorities, right? And they all happen at the same time. So I think you start taking nibbling at them a little at a time and kind of in parallel.
Right. So as we're doing these things and as we're extending the runway and pursuing some of those things, do you think that means obviously some larger planes potentially for fire service? What about for commercial? Do you see larger commercial flights and any new locations they might go to?
Well, so we're essential air service. So that's a tremendous tool that was used to prove the market. We'd like to graduate out of that eventually and be a market-based free market scenario where we have competition. I think that's the next logical move. But to your question, additional frequency is really top of mind. So we have a flight to Los Angeles and a flight to Denver. Could really use a second, especially to Denver, but also to Los Angeles. So I think additional frequency is important. As the airlines and we move towards that free market environment, the gauge will increase, the number of seats in the market. That also speaks directly to the runway length, right? The capability of the airports. And then if you look, how, the natural progression you see, as airports grow, you see competition, so another carrier at some point. And then, a bit further down that maturation timeline, you see airports and communities that get point-to-point service by usually ultra low-cost carriers. So carriers that see enough market demand for Orlando or for Las Vegas. We're pretty close to Las Vegas, but some of those markets that the point-to-point that we also need to be prepared for. That's obviously a bigger gauge of aircraft. So all that, when you put that into the mix, you have to think about what are the triggers that would cause you to expand the terminal, to expand parking. And again, going back to the constrained environment, it's a pretty tight footprint. There's not a lot of vacant land where you can just build parking lots or expand the concourse.
Well, and you've explained to me before with the runway, some of the length is about the size of the aircraft.
Mm-hmm.
And some of it is just we have a really high elevation and we can get pretty warm in the summer.
Right.
And that takes a longer runway to get a plane off the ground, right?
Yep, the physics of it, density, altitude. So the altitude and the thinner air combined with the heat, the temperature, the air temperature, makes the aircraft less, perform less efficiently, right? So it requires more runway.
Right.
So.
Okay. Learn new things all the time.
Yeah.
Outstanding.
I told you I was an airport nerd, right?
Yeah. Well, that's great, and I appreciate learning from you. You mentioned essential air service. Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about what is that and what's
Sure.
going on with that right now.
Yeah, so the Essential Air Service Program is kind of a unique program within the Department of Transportation where they go and they make sure it seems like a long time ago, back in the late 70s when deregulation occurred, there's a real focus and a real concern about smaller communities losing connectivity with the world via air service, right? Which was the legacy of airline service, going back. So the Essential Air Service came into being. It has some rules about how far you have to be from another airport with air service. A lot of it's really the really remote airports you think about in Alaska that have to have that connectivity. It also affects some mainland airports as well. Prescott had been a EAS city for a number of years, I think going back over a decade. And in a lot of communities that means smaller aircraft with connections to a Phoenix or a Salt Lake City or bigger hub, right? A lot of times there's not good connection. If you get on an airplane in Prescott and you go to Phoenix, you have to claim your bag and have a reservation with another airline and recheck it to get to where you're ultimately going, unless you're going to Phoenix. Well, so what happened in 2019 is that SkyWest bid on the Essential Air Service contract, which was a complete game changer because that meant that they had a relationship, a code share with a legacy carrier, United Airlines. So anecdotally, shortly after starting, my mother-in-law had a big a hallmark birthday, and we all gathered in Iceland to celebrate. So I was able to fly from Prescott to Iceland and back, check my bag one time, claim it on the other end, and vice versa. So that connectivity with a legacy carrier combined with the jet aircraft was an absolute game changer. And the communities completely responded to that. I mean, they are all in, they're excited about it. They ask me often about, what about new destinations? What about additional frequency? And so all the right questions are being answered. Now we have to do our part and make it an unconstrained scenario. So get the runway extended so that the airlines can be truly profitable in a free market scenario.
Yeah. So there's a few things it sounds like that we need, right? We need, we talking about the space around the airport. What's the eventual footprint going to be? We know there's going to be some development around the airport. We need to be thoughtful about that. You've talked about longer runways. What other things maybe do we need to help the airport get where we think it needs to go?
Well, I think I mentioned earlier we have we're very blessed to have based 330 based aircraft, which is again a really solid aviation community. And so when you think about that, some people think about private aircraft as toys or luxury items. The reality is that they're business tools. Even the smallest aircraft are used routinely by businesses to get from point to point or remote area to remote area and do business, or maybe they have locations in those places. Everything from doctors to entrepreneurs to small business owners, they use aircraft every day. So you take that up a notch and you think about corporate aircraft, the jets, the light jets, the business jets. I think that's an opportunity for us to grow and expand in the future. If you look at the affluence that's coming to our area, the second homes in a lot of cases, the critical mass, the population real large, I really see an opportunity for growth in the business and the corporate aviation, and that's kind of cool for a couple of reasons, right? It's great because you have more and bigger aircraft operating, but they require services too, specialized services like avionics and interior shops. They require pilots and maintainers. So you start to connect the dots of an Embry-Riddle that happens to train those kind of people, aeronautical engineers, and you start to see how does one thing beget more good things, more greatness, more commerce, more economic development, more growth, and more critical mass. And that's the exciting thing to me, is that you see one dimension have such a profound impact on that ecosystem that exists at the airport.
And then that connects with the business and the economy and the rest of the city as well.
Absolutely. Those are all business tools, right?
Right.
It's the investment in the community, it's faculty, it's workforce, it's connectivity to the world. So all those things are great. That's, again, full disclosure, airport nerd, but that's what excites me about the industry I serve.
Yeah. Well, that's outstanding, Rick. I really appreciate having you here. I've loved getting to know you and learn from you. Thanks for coming on the Prescott Today show.
Thanks for having me. Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you. And thanks everybody for watching. Again, I'm Dallin Kimble, City Manager for Prescott. I've had Rick Crider, our Airport Director, with us today, and we hope to see you again soon.